Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be joined once again by our flawless colleague, Dr. Stuart Ablon, the director of ThinkKids in the Department of Psychiatry at Massachusetts General Hospital. Today, we are going to be discussing the ABCs of ThinkKids and their philosophy. So, thanks for joining us again, Dr. Ablon.
My pleasure, Trey. It is always great to see you, great to chat with you. I hope we could do it in person sometime not too long from now, but if not, good to talk like this and good to catch up before on our sports worlds as well. A little
Definitely,
distraction.
definitely. So, first, let's check in with everything that's been going on. How are you really doing, Dr. Ablon?
Me personally,
Yes.
you know, I'm doing fine, Trey. I remind myself each morning I've got nothing to complain about. Obviously, there's restrictions with the pandemic, but I'm healthy. Knock on wood, my kids, my parents, my siblings, their families are healthy. Got a roof over my head. So I'm in good shape. I'm just continue to be really worried about so many people out there who are struggling for lots of reasons right now. And obviously, this is a big week ahead for our country as well. So, I'm thinking about a lot of other people at this point. I'm doing fine. Thank you, though. I appreciate you asking. And I hope you're doing okay yourself, my friend.
Yeah, definitely a lot to be grateful for, as you said. So yeah, you're the founder and director of ThinkKids. So how did you get involved with working with kids with behavioral challenges?
Great question. I was always interested in psychology and mental health. Both my parents are mental health professionals. Um, I think for how I got interested in working with behaviorally challenging kids and their families and teachers and all kinds of folks really goes back to my first job, actually, out of college, where I got to work with somebody who's sort of one of the world's experts on attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. And he was just beginning to show through his research that ADHD is pretty complicated stuff, and kids who have ADD struggle with all kinds of other things. And there were some really interesting data that we would stumble upon, that things like, wow, a fifth of kids diagnosed with ADD have speech and language issues. Maybe it's not just the ADHD that's leading to some of their behavioral difficulties. And so I sort of got interested like that. And then I got a great opportunity to go to graduate school and study with an expert in the area. And then I came out of graduate school and met somebody, Dr. Ross Green, who I used to partner with for probably about a decade. And he was thinking through this stuff at the same time. And it just sort of a bit of coincidence. And we were trained very differently. He is a behaviorist and saw the sort of limitations of that. And I was trained more as a psychoanalytic thinker and saw the limitations of that when it came to helping these kids and their families, and sort of grew out from there. And all, Trey, with the background of one of the things I did in graduate school was study what is it about different approaches that help people. And I know that sounds like a massive question, but we found the same thing always, that the most important factor in helping somebody was the degree of helping relationship between the helper and the helpee. And when I looked at how we handled behaviorally challenging kids, it wasn't much about building a relationship. It was about trying to motivate kids to behave better. And if they didn't, letting them know there were going to be consequences. And, that's not how you build a helping relationship. So that was sort of some of the beginning thinking behind this whole thing.
Yeah, and you have come a long way since that beginning. So as we look to the future, obviously with the circumstances of this year, the future is a little cloudy. But where do you foresee this organization growing in the future? Where do you want to take it?
It's a great question. Well, it's interesting. The pandemic obviously threw everything up in the air for a training organization like ours that likes to sort of meet with people in person and teach them and coach them and train them and work with organizations. All of a sudden, we had to bring everything online. One of the sort of secondary benefits of all that misfortune is it forced us to figure out a way to reach people remotely. And we've reached many more people in the last 6 months than ever before. And we study everything we do. And what we found is our trainings are as effective and people enjoy them as much, find them as engaging online. And they don't have to fly to Boston. We don't have to fly there. Anybody can join us from anywhere. So I think the future is figuring out how we leverage this to be able to reach so many more people. Because the idea is reducing the barriers to access. We know we've got an approach that helps people. How do we help more people learn it more easily and reduce the barriers for people to learn it?
Awesome. And so when it comes to this, at ThinkKids, you teach your trademark approach, collaborative problem solving. And now I was fortunate enough to attend both the Tier 1 and Tier 2 collaborative problem solving trainings. You just mentioned your trainings and how fortunate I was to enjoy that in person versus
right.
A lot of people are doing it online. But so when we think about, this training, we think about this approach, can you just give us a brief overview of, this philosophy and, what exactly that entails, collaborative problem solving? What does that mean to someone that hasn't heard that trademark approach yet?
Sure. Well, you're pointing out something really important, Trey. Is like there's an approach we call collaborative problem solving, and people can probably guess if you haven't heard about it. It involves collaborating with kids to solve problems, but you're highlighting there's a philosophy behind it. First and foremost, there's a way of thinking, and the philosophy is a pretty simple one. It's kids do well if they can, which means if a kid could do well, they would do well. And if they're not doing well, let's figure out what's getting in their way so we can help. And that is a huge departure from the way most people tend to think about these kids, because most people tend to adhere more to the idea that kids do well if they want to. And if they're not doing well, it must be because they don't want to, which then leads people to try to make them want to do better. Well, and as you're pointing out, we start from a fundamentally different place. The philosophy that underlies this whole work is kids do well if they can. If they could, they would. And then what we say is, and if they're not, let's use the research to show us what's getting in their way. Because it's not a lack of motivation. It's not a lack of will. It's a lack of skill. It's kids who have a hard time with the skills required to behave yourself well. Skills like flexibility and frustration tolerance and problem solving skills. And some of these kids, by the way, have those skills, but they can't access them when they need them the most. And by the way, that is something all of us have had a dose of. Even if you have excellent skills in those areas, the pandemic has required much greater flexibility, frustration tolerance, and problem solving from all of us. And if your skills were weak in the first place, all of a sudden now the demands are huge and it's hard to access those skills. So a lot of people have gotten a taste of what it's like for kids who've struggled with these skills for a long, long time. So it's all about skill, not will. And then the approach collaborative problem solving is, let's work together with kids to solve the problems that are leading to their behavioral challenges once we know why they have these behavioral challenges in the first place.
Yeah, so, you just brought up a good point. So my next question is, I kind of want to know more about, if you had some key do's and don'ts of, this philosophy and this approach, but also, does that change when you think about this in the realm of we're in a global pandemic, because I know you have the plan A approach, the plan B approach, the plan C approach, and how you might use things differently just because there's so many other external factors that are happening and they trigger different behaviors and whatnot. So I don't know if you have any key do's or don'ts of the philosophy. Sure. And how COVID-19 may change things at all.
Yeah. So I don't think COVID-19 honestly has changed things. I think it's become even more important to sort of practice what we preach with this approach, because it's not just kids do well if they can. You know what? It's adults do well if they can. It's you do well if you can. It's I do well if I can. And there are so many kids and families and teachers, parents, all kinds of people who are under enormous stress right now in this pandemic. And as I mentioned earlier, needing to apply the skills that they have even more importantly than ever before in the midst of all this stress. So it's so important that we approach each other through this lens of people do well if they can. If somebody's struggling, they don't want to be struggling. How can we help them? How can we collaborate with them? And I think, beyond that, for some do's and don'ts, people tend to focus a lot on people's behavior. And we tell people you really can't solve behavior. You can solve problems. So what you want to do is focus on the problem, not the pain. Okay, the pain's there, the challenging behavior is painful, but don't focus on the pain, focus on the problem, not the pain. And what that means is the antecedent, the thing that's causing the behavioral challenges, those are things we can work on together with kids or adults for that matter, and allows us to get proactive and to try to collaborate with one another.
Yeah, most definitely. And as we talk more about this, I'm just remembering all that I learned from both the tier 1 and tier 2 trainings. And I would say everyone could benefit from this, but when you think about who are these trainings geared for, when you're creating these trainings, like who do you have in mind that they could really benefit from these trainings?
Yeah. So, I think first of all, you said it. I think anybody can. I mean, look, we've all got problems in our lives, right? That we need help solving. And we've all got people in our lives who need help solving problems as well. So this will serve anybody well in any role. But when we're talking about kids who struggle with their behavior, it's the adults around them. So it's parents, of course. It's teachers who spend the majority of the kids' waking hours, at least pre-pandemic, with these kids, during their childhood. Teachers are crucial. But it's clinicians, it's mentors, it's really anyone, again, who works directly with, tries to help teach, raise kids, and especially kids who struggle with challenging behavior. And I think one of the great things about this approach, and you saw it, is it applies across settings. Sure, it's a little different in a home versus a classroom versus a residential treatment facility or a hospital or something. But believe it or not, the basic tenets are the same in a correctional facility, in my home, in your home, in a classroom of kindergartners or high schoolers. So it cuts across settings, and we have the data to show that it's effective across all these settings. So that's why it's really a wide range of people who could benefit from these trainings.
No, most definitely. And I guess my last question for you is just when you think about all the people that you mentioned, clinicians, mentors, parents, and teachers, to me, it sounds like these are a lot of the same people who are really being hit hard with everything going on. It's a double pandemic. There's just a lot going on. So it's especially affecting our teachers who are working so hard, our parents and whatnot. So, what self-care tips or, any helpful tips do you have for parents and teachers and everyone that we just mentioned?
It's a great question. And you're pointing out that we're talking multiple pandemics here. So, we're talking stress level on parents, teachers, clinicians, period. Then we're talking just a whole another level of stress on parents, teachers, clinicians of color as well. And that stress, and I don't need to tell you this, that stress has been there all along. This stress of being exposed to chronic racism in our country, and yet things coming to a head, which I'm hoping is ultimately for the good, increases stress. And I think it was Frederick Douglass who said, "There is no progress if there is no struggle." I'm hoping for much more progress, but it does mean much more struggle. So the stress is huge. I think, look, we started off, I think you said, I have a lot to be grateful for. It's actually been clinically proven. If you focus on the things that you're grateful for, the things that you have, the things that are good in your life, it's helpful. But don't focus on things. When I'm saying things, what I really mean is people and relationships. I mean, that's really what matters. And try to focus on those relationships. And, I think the other thing you say to yourself is, what makes me happy and what helps keep me regulated, fancy word for sort of, as calm as can be through things. And it's different things for different people. It's exercise for somebody, it's being outside for somebody else. Do the things that help you stay regulated, but try to stay close to those around you, because it's all about relationships and connectedness.
Definitely. So I appreciate those tips. And I'll say once again, thank you for joining us, Dr. Ablon. For the flawless family watching, if you want more from ThinkKids, make sure you follow Dr. Ablon and ThinkKids on their social media accounts. And, with the changing landscape of ThinkKids, I want to remind everyone that they are also offering their CPS Tier 1 and Tier trainings virtually, as Dr. Ablon said. So, it's an opportunity for people to stay connected and to learn more about those upcoming dates, which will be in Tier 1's kicking off in January, right?
Yes, I think we're in the midst of one right now. The next one's going to be coming up in January, and Tier 2 is coming up very shortly now. So there's still time, I think, to register for that if people are interested.
Cool. So we'll have all that posted. And, thank you once again, Dr. Ablon.
My pleasure. And Trey, it's always good to see you and connect with you, my friend.